Hi friends, Crystal here from Homemaking on the Homestead, and today we're going to talk about creative use of leftovers. My daughter and I were talking the other day, and she was mentioning that she had a couple things in the refrigerator, and it wasn't enough to make an entire new meal with, but she didn't want it to let it go to waste. And so what do we do with those types of things? Have you ever had that happen? You've got a little bit of something left in your refrigerator and you're trying to figure out, what should I make with this? Or is it just going to go bad and end up in the trash? So today, these aren't necessarily recipes as much as they are cooking inspiration, so that when you have leftovers, you can kind of think outside the box. Meaning that you don't always have to follow a recipe. If you've been cooking a little while, then it's really, sometimes you just need a little boost in that inspiration department, so that you can say, hey, I can turn this into this. So I'm going to show you 3 different things that I had recently, and what I did to turn these into completely different meals. I had been going through my freezer and pulling out a few things and realized I had a bag of pita bread that only had 2 pieces left in it. So I was like, okay, what can I do with these? I could have turned them into sandwiches or something, but I just decided that I would turn them into little pizzas. And you can use pita bread, you could use naan bread or something like that. So what I did to get started was to grab a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, because I was going to make some pizza sauce, spaghetti sauce. I kind of used them interchangeably. So that is what I began by doing. I put that into a pan, and I personally like to use tomato paste more than tomato sauce. It's just, I think it tastes better. It tastes a little bit more fresh. And to turn tomato paste into tomato sauce, you simply add water and salt. It's pretty much that simple. For a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, you usually use about 1.5 cups of water. So that is what I did. I just kind of slowly added the water, stirred it up to keep it smooth. Once I had it nice and smooth, I started adding my spices, which for me was some salt, a couple teaspoons of granulated garlic, a tablespoon of Italian seasoning, and I added a little bit of sugar. And I do that just because it takes off just a little bit of the edge of that acidic flavor of tomato sauce or tomato paste. Once that had simmered and was cooking away, I grabbed my pita breads and I spread a little bit of oil on each side of them, and then got ready to make my pizza. So I was doing a really super simple pizza, nothing extravagant. I put the sauce on, I put some pepperoni and some mozzarella. I was serving a great big salad with this meal that had all kinds of veggies in it, so I really didn't feel like the pizza really needed much more than that. And so that's what I did. I popped those in the oven and cooked those for about 15 minutes at, I think, around 425. And they made a very quick and easy dinner for us. But of course, those 2 little pizza breads did not use up all my sauce. And when I was done, I had maybe a cup or more left of the sauce that I had just made. And that's where the question is, what should I do with that sauce and make a new meal with it? Of course, I could have turned it into spaghetti, or I could have turned it into lasagna, anything like that. But what I decided to do was make some chicken cacciatore with it. You could also call it chicken spaghetti, I guess. So with the sauce, what I did was, in a pan, I just sauteed some veggies. I used just what I had. So I used onions and some celery and some grated carrots. After the veggies had gotten nice and soft, I went ahead and added the rest of my leftover sauce from the day before and a can of diced tomatoes. And because I had added more of those diced tomatoes, I decided to beef up the Italian seasonings and give it more flavor. So again, I added more Italian seasonings, more garlic, more salt, and a little bit of sugar, just like I had done before. I then had a package in my freezer of chicken breasts that equaled probably about a pound, a little over a pound, maybe somewhere between a pound and a half. And I went ahead and cut those up into bite-sized pieces. I fried those pieces up in a frying pan with a little bit of oil until they got nice and brown. At that point, I went ahead and put the meat into a 9x13 pan, and I took the sauce that I had just made that had been kind of simmering while I cut up that chicken, and I poured that over the top of all that chicken. I also had a little bit of provolone cheese left in my refrigerator that I had used from a previous meal, and so I went ahead and cut that into just slices, strips, I guess, basically. You could use any kind of cheese for this recipe. You could use mozzarella. You could also throw in some Parmesan. You could use cheddar. Wouldn't kind of be with the Italian theme, but when you're trying to use up leftovers, or when you're trying to just cook from scratch, sometimes you just got to use what you have on hand, and that's what I did. I took that provolone cheese that I had sliced and I laid that over the top, and I put the whole thing into the oven. I baked that at 350 until the cheese was nice and brown and melted, and my sauce was nice and bubbly. And I served that over some angel hair pasta. And of course, again, you could serve it over whatever kind of pasta you happen to have on hand. So that is how I used that sauce up. By the way, that meal fed us for at least 2 nights, and I think we even had a few of the leftovers that I added onto a meal for the 3rd day. So it made quite a bit for us. Okay, so this is always a dilemma I have whenever I use my Instant Pot to cook. So the previous night, before the video you'll see, I had made some barbecued pork, and actually I think we ate that 2 nights. So we had barbecued pork sandwiches. Now whenever you cook anything in the Instant Pot, you always put in whatever it is you're cooking, and then you have to have some liquid in there in order for your Instant Pot to come up to pressure. Usually it's anywhere from a half a cup, 2 cups, anything like that. When I make barbecued pork, I typically add water, I add a little bit of chili powder, I add some cumin, I add some salt, and I let that cook in those spices. After I make it, I pull it out and shred it up, and then that's when I add the barbecue sauce to the meat. So when it was all done, I had about 3 cups or so of that liquid. And I put that into a canning jar, and I stuck it into the refrigerator so that the fat could rise to the top and I could get rid of that. So that left me with this liquid and it's like, well, I mean, I could throw it away, but it has a lot of flavor. It's got a lot of that pork flavor. It has the spices that I added to. So what do you do with that? That same night that I had made the barbecue pork sandwiches, I also cooked some corn on the cob in the Instant Pot. Now, I used frozen, bought in the frozen vegetable section of the grocery store, so I threw in 4 little tiny cobs of corn into my Instant Pot, and then decided, hey, I'm going to follow this recipe I saw online, which was add in a little bit of milk, add some butter in there. The recipe also had adding sugar, which I didn't do, but and adding salt, and I let that cook. So the corn on the cob was fantastic. I think I let it cook about 8 minutes because my corn was frozen, and the corn was so delicious. I would definitely recommend doing that. However, when I'm done, I have this milk and butter, that liquid left over that is still usable. It can, you know, I mean, basically I'm just throwing away milk and butter, which does not make any sense to me. So I thought, okay, there has to be something I can do with both of these liquids that I have left. And I only had a small amount of pork left. It was just really a tiny little bit, and so I knew that that wasn't going to be enough. So what my plan was for all of this was to turn these into 2 different types of soup. And I knew, because like I said, the pork, there wasn't a lot of pork. So what I did, the first thing I did is I decided to cook some beans in the Instant Pot. I did pinto beans, and of course you could do any kind of bean you wanted, but I made pinto beans, and I got those going ahead of time because my plan is to make a bean soup that was going to obviously be very flavorful. It had a little bit of the meat, it had the broth, and so I knew that that would make a great soup. The other one with the milk and the butter, I decided I would make some chowder with that. So at that point, I pulled out some potatoes, the veggies that I had in the refrigerator that were mushrooms, celery, and an onion. I cut up all the vegetables and got those sauteing in a frying pan with a little bit of oil, and then I went ahead and peeled all my potatoes and then cut them up into small pieces. I put those potatoes on the stove to simmer and cook, And then as soon as they were done, I drained them, and then I was basically ready to start making my soup. So to my bowl, I put the potatoes back into my pot, and to that I added the vegetables that I had sauteed, and I added that milk and butter mixture into it as well. For the seasonings, all I did was add a little bit of better than bouillon and some pepper. Later on I threw in a little bit of pepper, but otherwise the seasonings seemed to be fine. I also added a little bit of corn, not a whole lot, maybe a quarter cup or something like that. At this point, I felt like the soup was just a little bit thinner than I wanted for chowder, so I grabbed a jar of my cream of mushroom soup mix that I made, which you might have seen in my video. So I just sprinkled a little bit of that in there, stirred it up, and let it cook until it was nice and thick. And basically my potato soup was done. Super easy. The other way that you can thicken potato soup if you don't want to add anything more to it is just take a potato masher and mash up some of your potatoes that are already in there and stir those up, and that will thicken it up and be a very easy way to do it as well. At that point my beans were done, and it was time for me to move on to my next soup. So I chopped up another onion, I sauteed that in some oil until it was nice and soft. And then into my bowl I added the jar of juices left from the pork roast that I had already removed the fat from. And I threw into there probably about a half a cup of frozen corn as well. I also added my cooked beans. So 1 cup of beans that I had cooked in the Instant Pot, it came out to about 2.5 cups of pinto beans, which is the equivalent of 1 can of beans. And then I added salsa, which was about a half a cup, just to give it some more Mexican-like flavor to it. I tasted it and felt like it could use a little bit more seasoning, so I added about a half a tablespoon, 1.5 teaspoons of taco seasoning to that, and that was perfect. We thoroughly enjoyed both of these soups for dinner. Either of them could easily be topped with cheese if you wanted to add more flavor. Obviously, you could add meat to the potato soup if you wanted, if you had it. If you didn't, it's fine. It's got the protein from the milk and all that from it. So we just ate it as is with a big salad, and it was absolutely delicious. So there you go. Those are my ideas and thoughts of how I took something from a previous meal, turned it into a whole nother meal. It can be very frugal to do that, and can really stretch your food and prevent food waste, which is great. So nothing in the refrigerator needs to go to waste if you just use a little bit of creativity and think outside the box, and not know that you don't always have to follow a recipe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed and all that good stuff. I would really appreciate that. All right, I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.